This is the Extra Point Podcast. During this podcast, we will dive deeper into our Sunday teaching and share practical next steps for your faith journey. Now, let's kick off the Extra Point.
Hey, welcome to the Extra Point. I'm Cheryl Ross, the Next Steps in Discipleship pastor here at Southridge Church, and I'm with Scott Beha, our lead pastor. And we finished up our series of You've Got the Wrong Guy on Sunday. But before we dive in any deeper, I just want to make sure that if you haven't liked or subscribed to this podcast, that you go ahead and do that so you don't miss out on any new content. Sunday was Palm Sunday, and you talked about how the whole setup of Palm Sunday and what it's all about was really to establish that Jesus is king. But then you brought Judas into the picture, one of his disciples, the one that most people know as the one who betrayed him, and kind of shared how Judas did not have Jesus in the right position. Yep. And because of that, he didn't see what he was doing as big of a deal initially.
Yep. This came really clear to me when we were doing our journey through Luke. I was reading the passages on Judas when we were going through that, and it just hit me. It was like, there's no way that Judas hated Jesus because he wouldn't have responded to the fact that he was being killed the way that he did. He wouldn't have returned the money. He wouldn't have felt remorse. He wouldn't have gone and killed himself. If he hated Jesus, he would have been like, yeah, this is exactly what I wanted. Right. But since that's not how he really felt towards Jesus, it became obvious to me. It was like, he's just that type of person that goes, there's parts of Jesus that I like. There's parts that I want to try to take advantage of. And so he has bad priorities more than having any aggression towards Jesus. Right. And I think that's a really scary place for people to be in because we think, well, there's people that are like really aggressively anti-Jesus or anti-God or anti-Christianity, and like all those people, they're clearly headed for destruction. But like that wasn't the case with Judas. This is not someone that's like aggressive towards Jesus whatsoever. This is just someone who seems to love money more than he loves Jesus. So he'll compromise his relationship with Jesus to go after what he really wants the most. And that's what a lot of people in churches do. Like, it's hard for me to like, I'll talk to people and they'll like just flat out be like, no, I know that it's not right what I'm doing right now, but it's not always going to be like this. I'm going to take care of it in the future. Like this happens a lot when people are not married yet. And they'll go, I know that what we're doing right now, it's not right, but we're going to get married in the future, and then what we're doing now won't be a sin any longer. And he goes, well, if that's your mindset towards your relationship with the Lord, that like, no, like if you're willing to compromise now, going to get married is not going to fix that issue. That's an obedience issue. That's not just that, well, we're just not married yet issue, right? But people do this all the time. Like, well, I'm going to not be financially faithful to the Lord now, but whenever we start making more money, then we'll get, it's like, that's not the way that it works, right? Like if I wasn't being faithful to the Lord when I was making $300 a week, I would not be able to give at the level that I'm able to give now. Like so if you're willing to compromise your relationship with Jesus, thinking that like, oh, it'll be okay in the future, this is not what we see in the life of Judas at all. Because my guess is that Judas thinks, well, Jesus is, how much trouble is he really going to get in? Like, it's not that big of a deal. Right. He's a teacher. He's not really causing any trouble. Like, he seems to be unpopular. They'll probably, maybe he'll get a night in jail and be released and told not to do that anymore. And Judas will get some money. Maybe everyone will be none the wiser because he's been fooling everyone the whole time he's been robbing from them anyways. I'll personally benefit, and then I'll just go back to my relationship with Jesus in the future. Maybe that's what he's thinking. But then when he realizes, like, oh, my goodness, this is a lot bigger deal than what I thought, then it absolutely crushes him to the point where he destroys himself. Right. And I do. I just see a lot of this in modern Christianity where it's like, I want to pursue what I want to pursue. Like for him, it was money, while just trying to like drag Jesus along and go, as long as like, I mean, like I show up for church every once in a while, so therefore that's like enough Jesus to go, and I'll just go do my thing, and then Jesus will bless my thing. It's like, this is just not the way that it works.
Yeah.
It just, you cannot pursue your vision for your life at the same time of pursuing God's vision for your life whatsoever. You just can't do it. I can't, like, if there's stuff in my life right now that I would love to go off and to pursue, but God's calling on my life will not permit me to do so. And I can't go after both of those things because I'll destroy myself just like Judas did.
Yeah.
I have to do what it is that God has made me to do, called me to do in this season, whether it's what I want to do or not. It's like, whether it's like the number one thing on my heart or not, that's just, this is what it means to be faithful to the Lord. Is that even when my plan contradicts his plan, we go with his plan anyways.
Yeah.
And I know that that's ultimately for my good, that's ultimately for the best for my family, for my life, and so therefore we go with that. And it's not this thing where you can't just pursue Jesus on the side. Everything else has to fit into that being the central thing in your life. Right? So like when it comes to your finances, when you put God first, then all these other priorities that you have can find their proper place after you put God first. When it comes to your relationships, you really think that, okay, let me phrase this differently, because you want God to bless your marriage, but you won't be faithful to him on the front end of it. I'm not saying that he won't forgive and that he won't bless. I don't want to say it as if that he doesn't do that, because he is a gracious and good God. But you have to realize that something is off in your perception if you're like, I will be in the wrong now knowing that God will just forgive me for it later. Because I'm thinking, what if that was Judas's mindset? Like, I'm going to betray this dude, but like, I've seen him forgive like everyone that's ever done him wrong. So me and him are probably going to be fine later. It's that whole idea of learning how to use but not abuse the grace of Jesus. Like if you're like, oh no, we're living in sin right now, but like we're going to get married later and God's going to bless our marriage.
Yeah, he will. But trusting him enough on the front end to say, I trust you enough that you're faithful and good enough that if we abstain from certain behaviors or certain actions or certain things, that you're going to bless that even more. I think, in our culture, there's just so much that romanticizes a lot of things that are not the behavior that God would want us to have or to do, or that makes it seem like it's okay and it's not.
It's the same kind of issue that single guys, and I can speak from experience, single guys that are filled with lust think that marriage will fix that problem for them. It's that same issue right there. You don't want, you're like, well, yeah, I'm filled with lust, I don't want to deal with it, but I'm just going to get married so then I can go have sex God's way and everything will be fine. No, listen. If you're being unfaithful and thinking some action in the future is going to fix that, you'll just find a new way to be disobedient when you get into that season of life. That's what's going to happen. Oh, well, we're living together right now because it's just easier for us to make one house payment, but then we're going to get married and then we'll do things God's way. It's like, no, what's going to happen is because you've already had a taste of disobedience here, when you get into that, okay, now sleeping together is not going to be your sin, but you will go find another way to be disobedient. If this is how you want to be in this season of life. That's what's happening with Judas here, is he is willing to compromise because he thinks that in the future everything's going to be okay with Jesus. And I just go, will Jesus forgive you? Yes, but can you be certain that your repentance is sincere if that's the way that you view your relationship with him? And again, all of this, and I've been saying this whole series, and really I've been saying this for like 5 or 6 years probably, all of this is the frustration that people have in the church today, especially pastors, and we don't even realize that we are the ones that discipled everyone into this. That we're the ones that discipled everyone into, oh, it's okay that you just made a mess of your life right now. God's going to fix all of that in the future. Just go and do this. And you go, we discipled people into this religious mindset that there's a way that we can live unfaithful and still okay, as long as we got good intentions in the future. Like, this is, like, why not just look at the life of Judas and go, this didn't work for him. I don't know why you think it's going to work for you.
Right.
Because for the people that it will work for, I promise you the vast majority of people, it's not going to work.
Right. Yeah. Something I put in my notes from Sunday that reminded me of a study that we're doing in one of my groups. It's Good Boundaries and Goodbyes by Lisa Turkers. And she talks about allegiance, how the Greek word for faith is pistis, and that like it's our belief in something, and that it kind of like gives context to belief in a greater thing, or like pledging your allegiance to something.
Yeah.
And how like when you say that Jesus is king in your life, your allegiance will be to him. And allegiance to something means that you are, it's not just what you say, but it's how you act. It's what you do. It's what you wear. And so she even talked about, like, in sports, if you say that you're, this is your team, like if you say Cubs are your team, but then you show up to a Cubs game wearing a Yankees jersey, that doesn't really show that your allegiance is to the Cubs, right?
Yeah.
And so it's that same kind of thought process in our lives and in our actions. Like if we say that we're pledging our allegiance to Jesus as our king, but yet we're doing something else, then we're not really, like, from what we're showing people around us and to God, it doesn't really show
Just
that he is king.
Think through this mindset. Like, okay, back to this example I've been harping on. Like, people that, and I'm not, this happens so much I cannot even begin to tell you. The amount of people that are sleeping together or living together unmarried and think that marriage will be the fix for their sin problem.
Yeah.
Why is it that you think that if you are willing to compromise in that season of life, why do you then not think that you will not also justify cheating on that person after you're married? Because after all, God's going to forgive you. You're not going to be. Why do you not also think that that's going to follow you into those areas? Like, for me, I would be very leery of someone that led me into a relationship like that if I were single. Because I would go, well, this person's okay with compromising their faith now. I want to be in a relationship with someone that's serious about their faith, because I don't want them to compromise after our marriage either.
Yeah.
And the only way that I know that you won't compromise after your marriage is if you don't compromise before the marriage. It's the same thing. Like, I want to be with someone that's being generous. Well, I want to see them be generous when they have $30 to their name before I see what they can do with $3,000.
Right.
I like it. It bothers me that we play this type of, like, I don't know. It's just this weird religious game where it's like,
almost like this fix-it mentality. Like, like either it's with the person of, oh, they're just like this now, but I can fix it. Like once this happens, or we get to this stage in our life, we can fix that, or we can change that. Like, I knew from early on that my husband likes video games. Like, he likes games, especially on his computer. I knew that about him. I went into that with my eyes open to that fact, knowing that, like, that's still going to be a part of him in our relationship. But, like, there's a lot of people who see certain things, like certain traits or whatever, and they're like, oh, well, they'll be better later on. Or, when we get to here, it'll be better. I think it really goes back to that, remembering that, like, who people are at their core, like, there's a character aspect of it. And I think that's what this gets to, is that, like, if you're disobedient, that's a character flaw that needs fixed.
You will find
but
other
you're not
ways
going to fix it
to be disobedient.
Yeah.
And I'm just telling you this by personal experience, because I've been that person that went, oh, well, marriage is going to fix this issue. Having kids is going to fix this issue. Making more money is going to fix this issue. And when it hasn't happened for me, I'm now speaking from experience to go, no, if I can just learn to be obedient in whatever season I'm in, no matter how comfortable or difficult that is, then I am setting myself up for obedience in the future. Compromise never leads to obedience in the future. It doesn't. at all.
Yeah.
The sin just changes is what happens.
Yes.
Okay, now this isn't a sin, but yes, you still have a disobedient heart, so you'll find another way to be disobedient. And we can't just act as if like who we are in one season doesn't, like, unless something drastically changes, is not going to be, what is it that people always say? Past performance is always the best predictor of future performance. Unless something drastic, like you actually receiving the gospel and becoming a new creation, happens in the midst of that, then past performance is a good predictor of future performance in that. Like something drastic has to happen where you go like a complete and total about face, like
that's
now I finally get
core.
the gospel.
Yeah.
Because and that's what has to happen. But if you're like just in this religious mindset that churches have discipled everyone into, that goes, go to church, read your Bible, give a little offering, do all this religious stuff, and then your disobedience won't be an issue in the future. You go, goodness gracious, we can tell that this type of discipleship is absolutely not working. One bit. It's not working. It's why so many pastors are frustrated with their congregations, but they don't even realize that they're the ones that are doing it. They're the ones that are doing it. Like, until we get better in the church with the nuance of being able to manage the grace and the truth that Jesus was filled with, getting better at managing all these different tensions of like, can God forgive you for your disobedience? Yes. But are you going to ever truly be forgiven if you're ever okay with compromise? I don't really know. Like, until we get better at managing these tensions, we're just going to disciple people into a system that is broken and doesn't work and leads to destruction, just like Judas found.
Yeah. And I think that's really the importance of placing Jesus in the right position of king in your life, like surrendering your life to him, bowing to him, allowing all those things to come second to him is really that goal. But getting there can be difficult at times when we have such a previous track record of feeling certain ways or like being taught certain things or doing certain things a certain way. And so really like getting to that place of making him king in your life. Like what are some practical things that people can do to really help position him in that right place so that the moves that we are making will work because we do have him in the right position.
What it looks like is that any area of your life that is out of alignment with his way of life has to be surrendered and changed. It can't be like sidestepped, or there can't be anything more important than that. That's what's happening, I think, for a lot of people is Judas never dealt with his issue with money, so therefore ultimately he ended up paying the ultimate price for it. Like, when anything in your life is more important, okay, we've got this relationship, this isn't a good relationship for me, but it's what I want, and you're going to put that in front of your relationship with God. See, the reason why you have to see Jesus as king and not just as like a teacher or a miracle worker or anything like that is that if you just see Jesus as teacher, then you will accept the things that you like that he says, and you will go find a different teacher for the areas that you do not like. And teachers are never our number one priority. Right? I know plenty of people that like Dave Ramsey. They don't worship him. They don't form their whole life around him. They like some of his teachings. And then I also know people that like some Dave Ramsey teaching and also don't like some Dave. Like, they just pick and choose what they like. You can't formulate your life around that. But like when it's a king, when someone's inviting you into a kingdom, this is different. This is something that you can orient your whole life around. Right? Like a teacher, that's not the case. Miracle worker, that's not the case. The miracle worker, Jesus, is very abused Jesus. It's very, manipulative on us whenever we just see him like that. But like King Jesus, that goes like, I've got to make every decision in my life line up with him. And until I do that, something else is in that place. Like if you are chasing money and your money is not surrendered to Jesus, I don't care what else you have to say or do, something else has your heart. That was the case with Judas. If you have a relationship that is not honoring God in your life, you are putting that person in front of Jesus. He is not king in your life if you are willing to compromise. You're just not.
Right.
I'm not talking about these behaviors that, like, we do, like, okay, I lose my mind on my kid or something. I'm not, okay, those, for me, I see a drastic difference between a lifestyle that you have implanted yourself in and a moment of your, like, I see these as drastic, like, everyone's going to have those moments.
Yeah.
Judas didn't have a moment. He had a lifestyle.
Yeah.
He was robbing from the disciples. He had an issue in John 12 with the washing of the feet. He agrees to betray Jesus, and then he goes off and destroys himself. This is a lifestyle. This is not like, man, I went out Friday night, had a bad night, did some stupid stuff, and got back on track on Saturday. That's not the same thing whatsoever. I'm saying if you're that type of person that you have a lifestyle, that everything in your life is pointing in a different direction than Jesus, except for that 1 hour twice a month that you show up for church, you are on the Judas path. And it's so scary because I don't think Judas ever thought he would get into that situation. Right. With the amount of proximity that he had to Jesus, with how loving and forgiving Jesus was, with the fact that he was in relationship with other disciples, with the fact that he was in ministry. Like in Matthew 10, that first passage we read on Sunday, when his name is introduced for the first time into the gospel record, it is part of the 12 that was being sent out 2 by 2 to go and do ministry, to cast out demons in Jesus' name. Yeah. Like, and this is why Jesus has this, like, the scariest passage in all the New Testament, that there will be people who on the last day say, Lord, Lord, didn't we prophesy in your name? Didn't we cast out demons in your name? And he will respond to them, depart from me, I never knew you. Like hell will be filled with nursery workers and First Impressions team workers and worship leaders and pastors and deacons and elders. People that did ministry in Jesus' name but never actually made him king of their life. Yeah. He was always in a different position, and so therefore it never worked. He never became the sole focus of their life, and they will ultimately pay. And this is why it's so hard to reach people here in West Virginia, because everyone is a little Christian. I mean, it's very difficult to find someone that like, atheism is 4% of the world or of the American population. Agnosticism is 4%. That's 8% out of 365 million people. That's not a whole bunch of people. Most everyone has some sort of faith, and still here in West Virginia, predominantly Christian faith, which is why this is Easter Sunday. I always try, Easter Sunday coming up, I always try to be very, very gracious, because I know, like, we were at, like, just below 400 this past weekend. We'll probably be closer to 600 people this coming weekend, even with all the people that are out on spring break. The church will almost double in 1 week. And I so badly just want to say to those people, and I may, actually, this may be the year, it is such a religious mindset to just show up on Easter, as if there is any merit to that whatsoever. It doesn't do anything. You just show up for Easter. That's just religion. But that's why all the churches in Kanawha County and in West Virginia are going to double in attendance this weekend probably, because of the spirit of religion that sits in the Bible Belt, without any of those people realizing that whatsoever, the fact that you show up at Christmas and Easter does not make you a Christian.
Right.
It just doesn't. And so that's why doing ministry here, it's easier to find those people that are antagonistic towards Jesus. It's easier to get them to see their need for God than it is the people that have 5 Bibles sitting at their home, that have a home church listed, but they don't ever show up to it, that still give every once in a while. It's very hard to reach that group of people, because there's so much religious activity in their life that fools them into thinking that that's what being a Christian is, that therefore the rest of their life they just justify by like, no, I'm a Christian, but it's like, no. Jesus did not call people to a religion whatsoever. He called them to come and follow him. And so this is why a bunch of these doctrines are so unhelpful that people preach, especially here in West Virginia. These doctrines of eternal security and things like that, where people are being propped up in their sin. You don't need doctrines like that. You don't need doctrines like that. Like, what does that say? First off, in regards to that, what does that say about Judas? That, like, Jesus called him to follow him, and yet Judas goes and does all, like, I know that, he was never saved. Okay, but that same group of people says that Jesus called him. Like it's just, it's just very muddy. And again, that's why none of that should even matter. It's not stuff that we should be focused on in the church, because the act of salvation over and over in the scriptures is something that God does in the future. It's not something that he points to in the past. It's something that he does in the future. He is saving us in the future. It's like, so stop looking at your past to justify your current sin, and rather give your life to King Jesus and let him change you now. So that way the rest of your life will be different. Yeah. Like, we don't need to just point to my, 8-year-old self that raised my hand at VBS that my parents dropped me off to because they didn't want to deal with me for the night.
Right.
If you're not waking up every morning to follow Jesus, then you're not following Jesus. I don't care what prayer you prayed 10 years ago. If you don't wake up every day to follow Jesus, you're not following Jesus. And that was the call of Jesus, was to come and follow me. Yeah. It was not to pray a prayer. It was not to take first communion. It was not to get baptized as a baby. It was to come follow me. And if you do not wake up every single morning of your life to serve and to follow King Jesus as your number one priority, you are not a Christian.
Yeah. Good stuff. Totally good. Well, we're going to be learning a little bit more about the King for Easter Sunday this coming week. So if you're local, make sure to check us out. But if not, the teaching will be right here on this podcast and this channel for you. And then we'll dive deeper into that a little bit more next week. So we'll hope that you will join us again as we give you more practical next steps for your faith journey.
Thanks for tuning in to The Extra Point. Be sure to subscribe to the Southridge Church podcast and tune in every Wednesday for another episode of The Extra Point.